Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. And the film I want to discuss today comes from 1935. This is Captain Blood, starring Errol Flynn, Olivia de Havilland, and directed by Michael Curtiz. A recent addition to the Criterion collection, which I purchased in the recent Criterion half-price flash sale. So Captain Blood is a story about Peter Blood. Now, he's a doctor in 17th century England. There's a rebellion going on, 1685 Monmouth Rebellion against the evil King James II. And as he is a doctor, he's called to administer his medical ability to a wounded rebel. But he gets caught up. The rebellion is unsuccessful. He gets caught up in the along with all the other rebels. He's sentenced to death, to hang, but King James II is convinced that he would be better, that all these rebels would be better off served if they were sent to Port Royal in Jamaica, the current Kingstown, and used as slaves because this new colony needed more workers. And we see all white slaves. That was by design. Jack L. Warner did not want to offend the sensibilities of the Southern audiences because they show slavery here as a very cruel institution. And indeed, some of these scenes are, especially the whipping, there's a whipping and there's a branding that are very explicitly shown. And still today, I think it would be a bit shocking. I would think very much so to audiences in 1935. So as Peter Blood goes to Port Royal, and they're sold off, but Peter Blood, even though he looks like a very well, he's very fit, the slave owners are passing him by because he is arrogant and defiant. So he's sold to Arabella, who's the niece of one of the plantation owners, and Arabella is played by Olivia de Havilland. So we have the first scene of a long partnership in Warner Brothers movies with Olivia de Havilland and Errol Flynn as Peter Blood. I think they made another 7 or 8 movies together. They were quite a sensation. Now, neither Errol Flynn nor Olivia de Havilland were known to audiences at the time. This was a huge gamble by Warner Brothers, the studio that made this film, because this was one of the most expensive movies they had made in a long time. The Depression had really cut down on budgets. Warner Brothers was successful with their gangster movies or Busby Berkeley musicals, but a great historical epic like Captain Blood was something new again. In the silent era, of course, Captain Blood was filmed in 22, and the Seahawk was a huge success with Douglas Fairbanks Sr. And in fact, they use some scenes from the Seahawk, some inserts of real boats, because there's no boats in this. In Captain Blood, they used miniatures, but they were actually 18-foot long boats. And then they would insert studio shots of a deck on ship. So this was a big gamble to use Flynn. Flynn was born in Australia, Tasmania, I believe, and he eventually makes his way to England. Along the way, he was a real delinquent, living on the edge of the law, great womanizer from the time he was a teenage boy, and was involved in all kinds of sort of shady activities. And then he comes to England. He's seen in a play by Warner Brothers. They had a production company in England at the time. He was spotted by one of the producers in England, and who was just besotted with his potential, with Errol Flynn's potential, and cabled Jack L. Warner, who was running the studio at Warner Brothers at the time. This guy is going to be a star, and quickly Flynn was rushed to Hollywood. He appeared in a couple films in small roles. So when the Captain Blood, Peter Blood role comes up, Robert Donat was going to was scheduled to play the role. He had had a big success in The Count of Monte Cristo. And again, the studios are now going into historical, epic type films, history. The Breen Code, the Hays Code, Joseph Breen, now in charge of it, was being very strict with contemporary subjects. So they rediscovered going back to this kind of historical epic. And so Donat had severe asthma, and this kind of the kind of athletic demands of this part. He eventually turned it down for health reasons. And when they looked around for other actors, there seemed to be nobody around. When somebody said, "Well, we got Errol Flynn here," they tested him. He tested fantastic. So he, even though he was very inexperienced, he was going to be the star of this new big, expensive film for Warner Brothers. Now, Olivia de Havilland, Flynn was 26. Olivia de Havilland was 19 at the time, and at the time of the filming of Captain Blood. But she had appeared in Max Reinhardt's production of Midsummer Night's Dream on stage, and so they were going to film it. And it was indeed filmed the year before, and she played the same part for Max Reinhardt. But in order to do that, she had to sign a 7-year contract, which comes into big play as the contract goes on. And she tested with Flynn, and they saw immediately sparks flew here. I mean, this is one of the great couplings as far as cinematic chemistries you're going to find in Hollywood history. And of course, this was the star system. Stars drew the audiences in. So it was a gamble doing two unknowns, but it was a very, very successful gamble because both actors became sensations with the public. So Arabella is the one who actually buys Peter Blood as a slave, but he's arrogant with her. He just becomes a regular slave, but he is a doctor, so eventually he gets a whole lot of privileges. And eventually there's a rebellion. Now, the first half of the film is all plotted at Port Royal, and then the second half is when the swashbuckler begins. And boy, does it, is it a swashbuckler. So Captain Blood, Dr. Peter Blood becomes Captain Blood. He's the scourge of the Mediterranean. There's only one other pirate that's of his equal, a French pirate by the name, played by Basil Rathbone. So they eventually, they join up forces together. But of course they must duel, and this is the first of the Rathbone, Errol Flynn fencing duels to the death. And Rathbone was a great fencer. Errol Flynn was very athletic, very convincing in these scenes with Rathbone. They became good friends, and of course they appeared in many films together, including next film, Adventures of Robin Hood, in Technicolor. And the sword fight there is even more magnificent. So, and then at the end of the film, we do get a real big, huge battle scene to sort of climax the film. And again, they used miniatures, they used inserts from the Seahawk. Today, younger audiences today, or audiences that didn't grow up watching Captain Blood on television, would be probably laugh at these practical effects. But you have to put yourself back in 1935, which I like to do when I watch movies from the past. I like to, what was it like for audiences to see these films back when they were originally released? I love to read contemporaneous reviews as well. And for 1935, this was terrific. Flynn's daring do is really like off the charts. It was like he was born to play this part, and born to be like the heir to Douglas Fairbanks Sr., who had retired from making films a couple of years before. So Flynn's career gets off to probably one of the, he was elevated to superstardom almost overnight. And you got to say that Captain Blood and some of the in the subsequent films these are basically juvenile adventure stories. This is not great art, um, but it's art in the sense that this is the studio. This is very much a studio film, and the studios in Hollywood, especially in the 1930s, they had such resources. They had great talent that they took from all over the world, including the director of this film, um, Michael Curtiz, who had run his own studio, owned, I think, his own studio in Hungary during his silent film days. Sometime in the mid-20s, he was spotted by Warner Brothers and brought to America. It took him a while. He had a great ambition. Curtiz had an artistic touch, to be sure, and he had great ambition to become to the top level of Warner Brothers directors, get all the big pictures. And this was the first one, and with such a great success, he had a roll of successes that was unbelievable, including obviously Casablanca, one of the most beloved films in Hollywood history. And de Havilland, getting back to Olivia de Havilland, she was the one who tested in court the 7-year contracts that the studios held. Now, she was a very ambitious actor. She wanted to appear in much bigger, important roles, and she had to really fight to be loaned out to MGM for Gone with the Wind, for which she was nominated for Supporting Actress the year Hattie McDaniel won for the same movie. Although Olivia de Havilland would go on to win Academy Awards, including, I think the last one was for The Heiress in 1949 and 1950, a movie I talked about on my channel a couple of years ago. So she challenged the 7-year contract because they were adding all her suspensions, because she would refuse to appear in some films and she would go on suspension. So when the contract was up, they were going to include the time lost for suspensions. She would get another 2 years she'd have to labor with, which she thought she was, not getting the best roles that she could get were she an independent star. And she won the case. That was a big case in Hollywood. And she got the eternal enmity of many of the Hollywood studio chiefs. Here was Jack L. Warner. The executive producer was Hal Walsh. He was in charge of production. And in the commentaries and the supplements, we learned how difficult it was for Curtiz to film this, because Hal Walsh was actively sending memos like David O. Selznick would do. You're doing it to Michael Curtiz. You're messing everything up. Why aren't you doing what I tell you to do? This was like the studio system. There was much pressure, and Curtiz was an autocratic director. He believed that actors were like marionettes and should just do what the director told them. And if he didn't like it, he would get very hard on. He was told to go easier on Errol Flynn, being it was his first performance and first lead performance. And Flynn got better and better as the movie went along. He was kind of terrified in the beginning, and they actually went back and reshot some of those scenes, because Flynn had, as I say, this was a role just made for his talent, and he realized that he could basically play himself. He didn't have to really act, worry about the acting, just be who he was, because Flynn was basically in real life this kind of character, and alcoholic, a real playboy. And he had health problems, so his career really deteriorated in the late 40s because of these health problems. But here in 1935, without mustache, I was surprised. I didn't remember he didn't have his mustache, his famous mustache for this role. And for this role, he's just as athletic and just vibrant and charismatic. He gets so many great lines in here from the screenwriter, and he delivers. I mean, he really, I can see audiences just jumping up in enthusiasm for cheering on Captain Blood. So in the supplements, we get about a 35-minute documentary that's very good in covering all the aspects of the making of the film, and then we get a commentary from Alan K. Rhodey, and this is a brand new commentary, so we should always applaud when the Criterion includes not an archival commentary, but a brand new 2025 commentary. And Rhodey wrote a biography of Michael Curtiz, so I was expecting something good, and boy, he delivers. This is a great commentary. And then we get, in the booklet, we get a essay by Farron Smith Namey. She's always good in describing the production and her take on the film itself. And I got to mention Eric Wolfgang Korngold. He is the composer here. Now, Korngold was a child prodigy. He actually wrote an opera in Europe when he was 11 years old. And he composed lots of classical pieces, operas. But he worked with Max Reinhardt in the theater in Europe. And when Reinhardt came to America to film his production, he wanted Korngold to come with him. And then went to compose the music. It was actually arranging Mendelssohn's, Felix Mendelssohn's music. And then he went home. And then Warner Brothers called him back to work on another picture. But when he got there, he said, Cat in Blood, we need somebody to score Cat in Blood. Would you be interested in doing it? And he heard it was a pirate movie. He said, no way. And then he watched some of the rushes and he said, wow, this is a movie that I should be scoring. Now, he used a lot of, I think it was Mendelssohn's music in his score. I don't know if it was a lot, but he must have thought it was a lot because it's music arranged by Eric Wolfgang Korngold. But music historians have said there's not much Mendelssohn here. This is really Korngold's music. So this is his first one. And believe you me, there's few films you're ever going to see where the music almost matches so well with the images that we're seeing, but not just with the images, with Errol Flynn himself, the sheer the propulsion of the music is really set to Errol Flynn's screen persona in this film in a spectacular way. So a good addition, I would say a very good addition to the Criterion Collection. And hopefully we might, the next production of Curtiz, Flynn, and Havilland was The Adventures of Robin Hood in Technicolor. Wow, would I love to see a 4K restoration or edition of The Adventures of Robin Hood coming into the Criterion Collection. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.